Today we have Xiren, I should say, on the show, and this is going to be really cool. He has quite a YouTube channel, and he has an awesome YouTube channel, by the way. It's called Know How Things Work, and his website's knowhowthingswork.com as well. And when I started watching Xiren's YouTube channel and looking at his journey through Lyme, it really made me think, and it really made me think about how disastrous this disease can be. And so let me bring Xiren on the show. Xiren, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Justin.
Yeah, man, like I was just saying, your YouTube channel, by the way, I have to say, your videos are the most beautifully produced and just amazing videos. Like, you do such a great job with those.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I figure that the topics are that I'm covering are pretty important. You know what I mean? Like when we're looking at the alternative, I love the alternative world of YouTube and this kind of thing that you're doing as well. I mean, this is exactly the category of what I'm talking about that I love is free independent journalism and all that. But when it comes to the topics I want to get into, they're difficult topics that require a lot of understanding, and they can tend to go against a lot of what we've learned growing up. So I figured, we're competing with people seeing those really polished, beautiful, high-end productions of major network TV shows, and
why not do it?
Why not bring my skills to bear to see if we can bring a little bit of, kind of level the playing field.
Yeah, a little truth.
Thanks for notes. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's awesome. So now, by trade, you're a musician, and you have an awesome studio, and you have a band, and so tell us about how all of this started for you, because being in the field of doing music, it's a completely different lifestyle.
Well. It's the timeline has changed from what I've originally posted in my YouTube videos. So when I look at what I observed at first was that around 2012, I was doing I'd lived in Colorado before moving to California for the last 10 years. Now I'm back in Denver. But when I first moved to LA, I was doing a lot of traveling back and forth and servicing a music market here in Colorado that I'd established. So I was doing a lot of traveling back and forth. Mm-hmm. And I stayed with a friend and got bit in the neck by a spider. And this is not roughing it in the woods or anything like that, like you're supposed to hear.
Right.
This isn't a $1 million house in a gated community in South Colorado.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
This was, not on a campground, not on the East Coast or wherever they're only supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it was, the best I can tell, it was a spider. It was a big spider bite. It was very traditional. There was no animal or insect left in the or vector left in the neck. But within 30 days, I had arthritis from head to toe. And my wife is a big yogi, and we were doing 5-6 days a week of yoga and all the, the boot camp classes and the really hardcore workouts as well. And then all of a sudden, I'm like an old man. You know what I mean? I remember that. I remember thinking, God, is this how this works?
Wow.
So that was the start of it. And then I didn't do anything about it because I didn't know how life worked, and I'd never gone to doctors. I hadn't really had major health issues that I'd noticed. But the reason I say the timeline changed, so it was about a year later before life was interrupted. I was touring with a band in California that I play with called the Joshua Tree, which is I'm the fake Bono.
Yeah.
Of a U2, not YouTube, but U2.
I love
as
it.
in Bono, Edge, Larry, Adam. Yeah. I'm in a U2 tribute band, which means we costume as if we're with the Emporio Armani and the leather jacket and all that stuff. So I look like Bono.
That's so cool.
It's totally fun. Totally fun. And it was a band that had been together for 10 years before I joined them. So it was a little bit like I moved to LA and then I cut line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were already opening, and they were the headlining acts everywhere. It was really fun. It was a great opportunity. It's been so much fun. But we toured central Mexico, which is 12,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah.
And that was about a year after that spider bite. And that was kind of what kicked everything into high gear. Was I came back exhausted and had some kind of infection in my lungs, and that was really the end of it. Within a few months, this ringing in my ears just kind of came on and ascended, and then all these, my hands and feet were turning orange. There was a smattering, and then these little things inside my body that felt like people had sewn pagers, like those old 90s pagers, into my body, and then were pinging those pagers on. So all these weird symptoms
that's crazy
were coming on. And but again, that was a year later after that had happened. But just for not for nothing, but it's turned out that there seems to be an aspect of this. My family's very private about health and all that kind of stuff. So let's just say that there are people very close to me that are now needing some of this as well. So it's very likely that it's kind of a family legacy, and some aspects of this may be part of a family legacy.
Right.
So when I look back even at my childhood now, there was evidence back then that some of the aspects that we call Lyme disease, because I define it differently than probably 90% of doctors as well, but that was happening in my childhood.
Isn't that fascinating?
Some of the things that we'd associate, for instance, with Bartonella infections, some of the strange thinking and thoughts and those kind of what would you say? Those ADD kind of thoughts.
Yeah.
Obsessive thoughts.
So did you?
I had an ulcer at 11.
Yeah.
I had 2 happily married parents. My brother's one of my dearest friends. I'm in private school. There's no reason to have ulcers, and here you go, ulcers.
Wow. So anyway. You had other aspects, other things happen to you when you're a kid that sort of precluded Lyme, that was similar to Lyme, though. Well,
we got to start by defining Lyme. So this is not just my definition. The doctors that I train with and a lot of the people that are, if anybody's producing results with Lyme, this is the definition they have for it, or this is how they're working with it, whether they know that they'd call it this or not. So let's start. Traditionally, we have Lyme being this is defined by the single bacteria that was discovered in the late 60s in Lyme, Connecticut, Lyme. And it's not Lyme's disease, like a guy's disease with an apostrophe S. It's Lyme disease.
Right.
But that was where they found it. All these little kids getting arthritis off of the coast of Plum Island Animal Insect Research Facility, which, this is this horrible place where some of this seems to be getting manufactured and stirred up. Yeah. It reaches the coast. You have the Willy Burgdorfer comes out from the CDC, defines, it actually in 10 years, it's a very fast process to find something that's behind an issue.
Okay.
So he finds this bacteria that's in all these kids that's causing this arthritis, or so he says. And so that's what we call Lyme disease, this one bacteria. Except what we know is that Lyme is what everybody on Earth is getting. So the bacteria is everywhere. The bacteria itself, in certain forms, has been around for billions of years. This Borrelia burgdorferi that was named by Willy Burgdorfer in the 70s has actually been around forever and ever. Virtually everybody has versions of this. We have all kinds of spirochetes in our body, dental trematodes, all these things that are in this same category as the Borrelia. So that's the traditional definition, right? And then you would traditionally go after it since it's just this one bacteria, let's hit it with antibiotics. So that's a little bit of the mentality there. Let's pretend that's that those are just the good intentions behind it. Of course, there's a lot more complexity, but then my definition, and it's not just mine, but the definition of Lyme disease as it is today, is a buildup of everything. So I look at it as, I'm doing this because it'd be columns. If we had a dry erase board, I'd write it out here. But it's over the course of our life, right? We deworm our pets. We have dogs and cats, and we deworm them. We do parasitic treatments on them.
Right.
But mostly humans don't. So we have this buildup of parasites. And again, when I look back at having an ulcer as an early teenager, of course, that's very parasitic. That would be a very parasitic attribute.
Okay.
And a lot of the other symptoms that I had, some of the mental fatigue, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Then you have heavy metals, right? So when I had my first heavy metal test, the doctor looked at me and he said, "Do you work on cars?"
Really?
And the truth is, if he had taken a metals test himself, he would have had the same result, and so would you, and so would everybody. So that's the thing. We live in a world where we accumulate parasites, we accumulate metals, and then what happens is we have these little toxic coveys that happen in our body, and those are beautiful for growing these microbes that we interact with. And the microbes are coming from everywhere. If you have a dog, you have, the ticks are actually one of the, sorry, the tick, not the ticks, but the fleas. The fleas on dogs are one of the greatest ways of transmitting the actual Borrelia burgdorferi and some of the co-infections.
Oh, really?
So there's that way. Then if you have a cat, you have Bartonella, you have cat scratch fever. So that's a major hostile co-infection of Lyme disease. So, okay, so here we got metals, we got parasites, we got microbes, and microbes is everything. It's the whole list of bacteria, whole list of viruses. But we're not done yet. Then we have environmental toxins, right? So we have all of this aspect of our food, the glyphosate, which we now know is a really horrible issue. 75 years with this water-soluble neurotoxin that is literally evaporated and is in every bit of every food ever grown. So we spend good money as we have to have good organic foods. And guess what? We get 80% of the glyphosate of the commercially grown foods. So it's just one of those things. Like if you live in the world, you have aluminum, mercury. I had strontium off the charts, gadolinium, all these like crazy. The gadolinium was obviously from the MRI, but
we had Stephanie Seneff on the show a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, and she was talking about how 10% of, let's see, she said, so gasoline, 10% of gasoline is coming from ethanol, and ethanol is highly sprayed by, corn, derivative of corn, and highly sprayed with Roundup. And so she's doing some testing, and she's sort of thinking herself now that, it's in the air. We're actually just breathing glyphosate now, which is nuts.
Absolutely. Absolutely we are. Yeah, no, it's everywhere. That's how it's getting into our food, is because those organic farmers aren't using glyphosate.
Yeah.
They might not even be near neighbors that have commercial farms. It's just that it's everywhere. So when the rain comes down, when the municipality water is used to water the fields and tend the fields, they just happen. I mean, this is an unavoidable aspect, and I'm not even done.
This is only like 1%.
We've got a lot of the picture here, but what we're looking at is we've got the metals build up, we've got the environmental toxins build up, and all that category of industrial toxins. Let alone, most people don't realize, when we talk about weather modification, there's this whole world like, is this real? Is this conspiratorial? Yes, it actually is conspiratorial, and it is absolutely real. And when you look at the literature, there's a couple of great channels on YouTube where guys have dug into the literature and found out that the very first, if you were to guess, if somebody's watching and you were to guess how long some of these programs have been effectively being used to steer, guide, and change the weather. And you'll see why this is relevant in a second. But most people don't even know that's happening. For some of the people that know that's happening, I would ask the question, well, how long do you think that's been going on? And of course, when a lot of the popular media shows that it goes back to the 80s and then really kind of ramped up in the 90s and then hit hard in the thousands.
Right.
But the first time that they successfully steered a hurricane using coal-fired ash in the sky was 95 years ago off of the coast of the eastern United States. And they steered the hurricane from Washington, D.C. into the Florida coast. They killed a man and they kept going. But the reason I bring all this up is to, first of all, kind of open the mind that most of us just haven't had the time, because this has taken me, for basically 10 or more years, I've been a professional researcher. Even as a musician, you set up at the gig.
Yeah.
And then you have 6-7 hours to kill, right? Before you perform. So you read books and studies and literature and YouTube channel, all this kind of stuff. But this is where I've gone with it, is I've realized that the best doctors that are getting the result actually factor in. You have to factor in the geoengineering that's going on. It's not new. It's very ancient. And we breathe it in because as they put those things in the atmosphere almost daily, no matter where you live, there's virtually no exception on Earth. Like we went to Tulum for our honeymoon. Tulum doesn't even have an energy grid. They don't have power. They don't have like 110 outlets. Wow. And they have, stratospheric aerosoling and, there's no place that doesn't. So you have to get that aluminum out. That's where when I look at my metals test, I don't know where else it would come from. It's not entirely, I'm not pinning it entirely on the geoengineering chemicals that are used, but
somehow you're being affected. Somehow you're being affected.
Radioactive strontium is off the charts on my metals test. Where am I getting that?
Yeah, how does that happen?
Right. So, okay, so we have metals, we have environmental toxins. Again, if you miss these pieces, if you have a doctor that's like, I don't believe those, well, great, but guess what? They still have to come out. They're still in there.
They're still there.
Those chemicals that they're using that happen to match the geoengineering patents, which we're all, I mean, when you look at cancers, right? Everybody thinks breast or prostate are the biggest cancers. It's actually lung cancer is the number one killer. The number one killer.
Wow.
So these are huge pieces of the puzzle. And then you have the last piece. Well, who knows? You know, in 10 years we might find out that it's Scientology was right, and planet whatever that came down and zapped us, and that's really what Lyme is. But it was Judy Mikovits that filled in probably one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. And here's a nice light read for those of you.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up on the page here.
But she brought up retroviruses. So we have metals, environmental toxins, parasites, microbial load. Then we have this whole category that almost nobody knew about called retrovirus. And this is a new piece. This is the research is not new. It's like 80s, 90s, and before that. And it was abruptly shut down in the mid-90s by the powers that shouldn't be. And this is one of those things. Even the lady who wrote this book, the PhD the researcher who wrote this book, studied this and figured this out. She went to jail for 10 years for finding these connections.
Wow.
And basically what she discovered was that this is, as I mentioned, everybody on Earth is heading towards a version of Lyme disease. Lyme is just the brand name for it, right? You can call it dementia, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Huntington's disease, blah-de-blah, all, autism, whatever you want to call it. In my opinion, those are the name brands that go along with the symptoms. But when you look at what those people have in common and the doctors that are getting those people better, each and every case, they addressed the metals. They addressed the microbial load. They addressed they addressed all these aspects that we didn't know we had to have, but you have to peel those off. You have to get the environmental toxins out. You have to get the parasites out. I've been doing proper parasite treatments for a year now, and there's not a single bathroom break where my toilet is not exciting in 1 year. This is how dramatically every doctor missed this. Do you know what I mean? Like, wow. No, you don't have parasites. No, it's not an issue. I have a macro lens and a camera full of photos that beg to differ.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So normally they say with parasite cleanses, it's like you want to do for at least 90 days, right, to get all the cycle of the eggs. But man, you've been going for a year?
Well, this is the first time in my life I've ever dewormed, tried to work on getting the parasite load down. And evidence supports that this is an issue I've had my entire life. Not to mention I grew up in a house with mold and things like that. But when you look at the ulcer, that's, those are a young person having an ulcer like that, that's parasitic. There's virtually nothing else that would be. You know what I mean? You're not.
So going back a little bit, you said you got bit by a spider. Typically, people think ticks, and but that's not necessarily the case because people have documented spiders and fleas and things. Did the spider leave one of those bullseye rashes on you?
No, the bullseye rash, not that I observed. If it did, I didn't see it. The bullseye rash tends to be if A, you have an immune system that works, and B, if you're getting reinfected. So the new research, in fact, it's not even new research on this. This is one of those that we kind of missed from the 80s, is that the bullseye rash really just means you're getting reinfected. So when you look at, everybody gets the ticks are what get the worst of this. Like they get the blame for all of it. Right. And there's certainly to blame, but basically every creature that bites you, if it bites you, we just live in a world where it's not the same world that our grandparents grew up in, or even our parents grew up in. It's not even the same world you and I were born into. Like it's, when you have 15,000 new chemical patents every day worldwide being applied for, and those are all ending up in our system. Is it 1,500 or 15,000? Either way, let's go conservative and say it's 1,500. I'm forgetting now. But let's say it's conservative. Either way, those all end up eventually in our bodies. Do you know what I mean? They're in our food packaging or whatever else, and we have them in our bodies somehow. We have to get them out. But ticks, when it comes to ticks, they get the big, they really get the stigma of being the worst. But when you look at it, it's about the retrovirus. So what would have happened when I rewind and tell my story, and I look back at how 2012 was really the bite, and then this huge escalation of maybe stuff that had been very subtly brewing my whole life.
Yeah, sort of dormant. Yeah.
Manifesting as asthma, which again is a big parasitic, that's a huge parasitic tell that's going on. You've got all these little things that I had as a kid that kind of tell that stuff. Mm-hmm. But when the spider bit me, when I reevaluate my story now, it's not that it transferred Lyme disease as we think of the Borrelia, it's whatever else that it had in probably all of the Judy Mikovits, what she talks about, all this retrovirus that comes with it, these animal retroviruses. And this, by the way, is a whole topic. I'm happy to, we can dive into the retrovirus thing and distinguish that for people. But if you have symptoms, basically what the best doctors are doing now is if you have, as I said before, everybody has that buildup of all those aspects, and we're at varying degrees of the toxic load, the microbial load, all that kind of stuff, all of us.
Right.
If you have somebody with health issues, if they're having symptoms, that's the retrovirus piece. Typically, that means the retrovirus has activated and it has tipped you over, and it's called the cell danger response. And that's now your body screaming out, and you get these crazy weird symptoms, and it augments all of the bacterial and microbial and even, the loads, the problems we have with the metals in our body and things like that are shutting off our immune system, causing some gut problems, the glyphosate, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the retrovirus can be turned off first. So this is what the doctors are doing now. Now that this piece is breakthrough. This piece is changing my life. I'm literally working with this right now. I have 4 people that that I love very much that I'm working directly with, and we're doing this. So I'm doing to them what I wish I had been able to work with on myself. I don't regret the last 6 years of learning, but obviously if I could go back in time and address the retrovirus first,
that would have been a big deal.
Turn off the cell danger response. And what they're saying now is if you do that, it's 2 to 3 months, you get it turned off. With things like broccoli sprouts. Yeah. And I'll explain why, because that sounds crazy, right? Why would that do anything? But things that are relatively inexpensive, or things you can make at home, or things you can find in your area, can turn it off. And of course, in the environmental piece that we talked about before the call, and the environmental, the EMF and the EMR.
We'll get into that, yeah.
Well, that actually is a piece of the retrovirus, but you turn it off 2 to 3 months, and then the symptoms are down or gone. And then the quote Lyme aspect, unloading the metals, unloading the parasites, unloading, becomes a very different scenario. Becomes a much easier scenario for people.
Okay, so Xiren, so what you're saying,
approach.
What you're saying is that anyone with Lyme disease is dealing with what we call this retrovirus, and so the first order of business is to turn that off. Then you would say that way the Lyme can be kicked back to a point where you can actually get on top of it with some of the sort of more traditional natural approaches. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly it. So, I think of it like, we were just talking about, I don't want to use your book for everything.
No, that's
but
good.
If it's like a scale, right? I tipped over in 2012, and then that retroviral effect went into play.
Okay.
Because what retroviruses are is, even though the bugs that bite us have them, what they're carrying are animal retroviruses, which aren't supposed to be in human beings. Those are not supposed to be in human beings. And if you look at the vaccine research, that's... they're in vaccines for some weird reason.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go there. I'll let you research that if you want.
Yeah.
But that's part of the microbial load. So if you've had a vaccine, schedule in your life, you've added those things into your body, the metals, the weird, those weird things that are in the vaccines. But what we're talking about first and foremost is the actual, this is me showing my genetic code.
Yeah.
I point here, it's your DNA. So the retroviruses are actually part of our evolutionary, they're in our genetic code. They've evolved with us on Earth, as has retroviruses with every other plant on Earth.
Interesting.
So and plants have had even more time to adapt to them. So what happens is we now live in a world where we're full of these chemicals and these toxins and all these things. We're not in natural light. We're not going out in sunlight anymore. We're not doing sun gazing. We're not doing things that, we're told that we have to cover our bodies so that we don't get cancer from it. Like, we're literally hiding from the sun. So we have that aspect in addition to all those levels that I talked about.
Right.
Then we have the house full of weird fields and all this stuff. And what's happening is it's taking all of these retroviruses, which have been integrated and they're in our DNA, but they're sitting quiet. And they become loud. They get out of that code. They get agitated out, and we have to quiet them and put them back. So it's not a killing process. The endogenous, it's called human endogenous retrovirus, HERV. We're trying to quiet those and get them back settled. Like, I think of it like peaceful with their little sleeping blanket and all that.
Yeah.
That's really the goal, right? Then when we get bit by the bugs, that's the animal endogenous. So we now have this multiple, as well as the bacteria and viruses and whatever else crazy stuff they have.
Wow.
But that's the goal. If you start with the retrovirus piece, now I'm in this personally myself, hopefully right around the turning point. I'm starting to know, I've done a lot of the work here. I've found tools for every aspect of this, and I've done a lot of work, and my symptoms are still there. I have no Lyme in my body. I don't test like electrodermal testing, muscle testing, which if for people that aren't aware, this is legitimate. This is science. This is real. Not every person that muscle tests is created equally. It is a talent. If you have muscle testing software or, the likes, electrodermal software is the technical name. Again, goes back to Reinhard Volt's work in the 1940s and 50s, but you have this whole, like Avatar, Skio, Zyto, any of these software programs, and a talented user can see what's in your body lickety-split. Better than any urine test, any kind of blood test that you can send off to the lab, way less expensive, much more rapid, and much more sensitive. So again, I stopped testing positive for Lyme or any of the bacteria associated with it months and months ago.
Really?
It was not showing up, and I know how to make the DNA connections test sing. I know how to make that urine test sing, and there's nothing in there this time. After 6 years, it's gone. Electrodermal was still seeing, and we don't even see it on electrodermal. It's all gone, right? But guess what? I still had symptoms. I still had fatigue and da-da-da-da-da. Retrovirus, we got to turn that off. So now I'm doing that. I'm doing that for the other 4 people that, in my life that I'm working with. And we're coming from that approach. And then once you do that, then the clinical practice is to give that the 2 or 3 months of the retroviral, trying to turn that off, quiet that down. And, you can do other things in there too. But obviously, if you get that turned off, then they just say that that's a whole different world. Then Lyme becomes a very easy thing to treat after that point. Yeah,
fascinating stuff, Xiren. Gosh, we're going to come back from a break, and I want to talk with you about some of the things that you're actually doing on a practical level to turn off that retrovirus. So this is a fascinating show. If you guys want to check out Xiren's website, it is knowhowthingswork.com, and I would highly recommend going through his YouTube channel and subscribing to that, because his videos are great and super informative and really high-level stuff. And I just really encourage you guys to check out his website, knowhowthingswork.com. One of the things I wanted to tell you guys about was this Magnetico mattress pad that we have in our home. And we just had a bunch of questions come in about that from the last time that we talked about it. And it's really, really a fascinating piece of equipment. And let me bring it up on the show here, and you guys can take a look at it. Magnetism is really, really important, and that's why we have different aspects of our store called light, water, and magnetism. And magnetism, the Earth's magnetic field has been weakening, some say over 80%, since the last 4,000 years or so. And some people say that the Babylonian Empire, during that time, the magnetic field of the Earth was around 3 to 5 Gauss, but now it's around
0.5. So it's way less than half of that. And some people say when the dinosaurs were roaming the earth, it was up to 300 Gauss. And that's, the work of, Robert O. Becker did a lot of work regrowing limbs from salamanders in the 1960s. He was an oral surgeon. He used a positive, negative electric and magnetic stimulation to do that. So we did a whole show with Dr. Dean Bonley on that, on magnetism and how it affects your field when you sleep. And it's really, really quite fascinating. We've been using ours for quite some time. Let me see. Here's a picture of Kate when we were first installing it, and she was actually pregnant. She has that. And yeah, so we sleep. It's pretty cool. It's got like 2,000 magnets all displayed perfectly. And the thing weighs like 75 pounds. It's pretty fascinating. And they have a 20 Gauss version and a 10 Gauss version. And we right now only have the 10 Gauss version. But it's just awesome. I love sleeping on this thing, and it makes such a difference in our sleep. And so I want to let you guys know about that. Oh, and Magnetico has said that they will give you a 10% off discount if you enter the code EHR10. I highly recommend some of these tools Xiren's going to be bringing up, tools that he has. It's really important, I think, to bring in some of these tools to your home and, bring these tools in and, transform your home into a healing space for yourself instead of a space that's going to be damaging for you. So the Magnetico mattress sleep pad is something that we use every day. And then also we had, Xiren and I were talking before the show about, a building biologist, and there's a guy that we want to get on our show, and maybe Xiren can hook us up with him, but he's up in LA. Recently we had Brian Hoyer on the show, and he talked about, he's a building biologist, and he came to our house, and it turns out we're living in an EMF just nightmare in our house. So that combined with the fact that we don't own it, and there's a 5G tower going up literally right next to our neighborhood. And what we've been learning too is that these 5G towers that are going up all over the country, these things are actually jumping on to the electricity that's in your walls, and they call that dirty electricity. And these are sort of known as non-native EMF, and there's a lot of studies, and Xiren can talk about this as well, showing the effect that this electricity, these electric fields, currents affect our body, affects our blood sugar, affects our ability to create insulin. So diabetes is, connected to this stuff. And it's really something that I think EMF and 5G, I think it's the biggest environmental change that has happened since the invention of electricity in 1879. We started electrifying America. And if you look at the disease rates from 1879 to now, corresponding with electricity, it's just goes hand in hand. It goes right there with it. There's parts of sub-Sahara Africa. I was listening to a show recently with Sam Milhelm, and he was talking about there's parts of Africa, sub-Sahara, that don't have any electricity, and they don't have any leukemia, no childhood cancers, and cancer itself is not even a thing that's even a part of their life. Yet in America after 1960, 1 out of every 2 people. It used to be 1 out of every 3 women and 1 out of every 2 men. But if you're born after 1960, which I was born in 75, you're looking at a 1 in 2 diagnosis. And is there a connection between dirty electricity and all of this stuff and cancer? Possibly. So that's why we like the green wave filters, and you can stick these on your home, and they actually have a plug on the bottom, and they come with 2 or 3 prong options, and they significantly reduce the amount of dirty electricity in your home and in your walls coming from the grid. So this is something to consider. So green wave filters is something that we stand behind and like a lot, and as well as the Magnetico mattress sleep pad. So let me bring Xiren back on the show and talk with him about, let me bring me up, and then I'll bring Xiren up and talk about some of the things. So Xiren, what did you do yourself to lower this retrovirus? Because you said you're working with that now, and I'm curious what you're doing now to actually do that. So there's a number of, so there's, when you look at what causes the retrovirus to come out, there are a number of agitators that we have to mitigate related to EMR, EMF. And then there's some chemistry that can be done. And like I mentioned, I can get more into this in a minute too, but like I mentioned, some of the plants on Earth that have also adapted with the retrovirus they've had more time to adapt to the retrovirus. So when we consume some of these substances, they tend to transmit those qualities of adapting the retrovirus, quieting the retrovirus, and we get the benefit of the grace of the evolution of those plants. So there's definitely some of that. There's some, if I was a man, any man that just, plans on living a while, I think you should just add broccoli sprouts in at night for the rest of your life. Like, that's going to keep your prostate from happening. That's going to keep the retroviral down. And by the way, when we talk retrovirus, what Judy Mikovits got in trouble for was that she did link, certainly breast cancer, the really aggressive prostate cancers, the Huntington's disease, which I've never seen much good solutions on that at all, and that's a risk in my greater family in Ireland too.
Wow.
It turns out, all these things that are supposed to be genetic disorders as well, that are in there. It's the retrovirus. So where it would normally take 20,000 years for a gene to mutate or adapt, as it were, in a natural human cycle, the retrovirus flips it on in milliseconds, on, off, whatever. If you have MTHFR, you have retrovirus.
Really?
Why? Because they hate methylation. That's a death. That's the death of retrovirus, is methylation and acetylation. So, so when you're doing things, you want to do things that turn on the methylation, and you want to put some stuff in. But let's go over to the EMR piece.
Yeah.
So when you're in a house that has all these fields in it, like we mentioned, they're getting jostled out. And back me up. I think your question was, what did I do to mitigate specifically?
Yeah. What are you doing now to do that? Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, this is something I recommend to virtually everybody. Now, it's not, unfortunately, let's see if this is going to be a good... You can see that. So it's the Acousticom 2. You can buy this sucker on Amazon Prime very inexpensively. I think it's about $100 or maybe a little more, something like that. LessEMF.com has it. I think SLT.co has it. But any of those, you can buy it in a number of places. And this is just good. Let's just show you. This is to measure. So this is going around your house. So right now, you can see these are in gigahertz. Okay. So we're actually in one of the lower EMF rooms in our house. And we set it up this way specifically so when I'd be working in the studio, which can be a lot, that the EMF going through all the building materials would actually be reduced by the point that it gets in here. So, and ultimately you want to get, the debate as far as how low you want this measure to be in order to be healthy is something that is a little bit up for discussion, because frankly, research goes where the money is, and there's no money in turning off EMR. No. And not for nothing, but the cell phone companies that these days, the telecom companies that are pumping this stuff out, like most people, yesterday I was in a Best Buy, and one of the blue shirts came up to me, and 20 something, and she starts trying to sell me a cable package. And every once in a while, I kind of try out a conversation on somebody. Like, I'm just going to give them the truth and see how much their brain explodes or how open they are to it and whatnot.
I know. I love doing that too. It's so fun.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so sorry, so sorry for destroying you.
Yeah.
Some of these people, it used to be the hot tub in California.
Yeah.
I go to the hot tub and I just practice conversations and making sure I had all my science in order and everything. But the conversation was, she just had no idea that there was any harm that could possibly be associated with the cell phone in her breasts, that she's storing in her,
it's crazy,
in her
right?
bra or pants or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, right? Like in Israel, they sell cell phones with cigarette label warnings. Just, they know about this stuff. And other, Iran and Russia, two of the countries we're in the axis of evil with, they are some of the only countries on earth left that actually make sure that pregnant mothers are in safe EMF environments. Because now we pretty much know if you're living with a certain level, a certain reading of radiation in your room, like from a Wi-Fi router, from the cell phone next to your bed, from the cords in the walls leaking all that electrical field into the, that 8-foot wafting electrical field that comes out from plastic conduit. they can now with certainty tell, depending on the level, if your child is going to be born autistic. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just, it's one of those things when you look at the research, if you live in any other country, most people know this stuff. And in America, it's locked down, and the telecom companies are using they're using the exact same lawyers that Big Tobacco used when they said, we didn't know nicotine was harmful and addictive.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you go figure out whether or not you want to, trust that whole thing. But the research is very clear. Even though it's suppressed, just like all the GMO stuff has been really hardly suppressed in the U.S. Not hardly suppressed, it's been very well suppressed.
Right, perfectly
very
well.
aggressively.
Yeah.
Perfectly well. And the same thing is with this. So why is this maybe a new topic to people that sounds a little crazy? Well, there's a lot of money. There's just a lot of money at stake. Okay, so what do we do? So first of all, we measure. Now, this is a great starting point for people too. Like, you can measure your house and just see where you're at.
Okay.
And we want to be low. There is a green reading on here. You won't see it in my place.
Wow.
This is a disaster zone in Denver here.
Yeah.
But you want to be down in the 0.05, 0.10 range. You know what I mean? Like, even 0.3 would technically, for many Lymies, mean you're not going to get too well. Now, I took off my sweet silver shirt for this call, but normally I just wear a silver shirt. I put the meter in it. If I put the meter down in my silver shirt, it's like a T-shirt that looks, that has silver in it, that literally has silver in it. If I put the meter down, the bars drop. Like, it's definitely a lower reading.
Wow. Now, where did you get the shirt? Did you get the shirt off Less EMF or?
LessEMF.com. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And they have lots of different. They have hoodies and they have all kinds of stuff. I like the T-shirts because then I can wear stuff I like over the top of it.
Right.
So that's one thing I do. But again, it's an awareness issue. So there are definitely technical. If I'm talking to somebody that's like, okay, cool, I understand all this stuff. I understand EMR. I'm ready to go. How do I make my house safe? That's one conversation. For people that this is a new conversation to, you just got to let it. It's like percolating. You just have to sit with it. You just have to. It takes me like sometimes a year to have conversations with people wherein they finally start addressing it in their house. You know what I mean? Because it's just we don't think of our cell phones like this is a device that came from a military warfare program. Do you know what I mean? Like the whole technology, the 2.4 gigahertz carrier wave, this was not like some somebody didn't just benevolently come up with this in a lab and go, hey, this is way outside of a biologically healthy thing, but maybe we'll just not notice that. And no. This is like, unfortunately, there's a lot of pieces of this that are highly bad news that seems like we're known about to be bad news. But so you first have to treat for people new to this, it's one of those things you just got to realize this is not a benign device, right? And most people are kind of coming around to this, especially people with health issues. Maybe your audience is a little hipper to this conversation as well. Yeah, they are. So we can move beyond some of the kind of basics. But, you don't put this in your body, you don't put this in your pocket. As you can see, mine is in airplane mode. So I make sure that this is one of the main things, none of the different antennas are turned on. I don't know how well that's coming across, but so I've got the cell off right here. I've got the Wi-Fi off. I've got the Bluetooth off. And then, of course, in iPhones and some other phones, it might be different, but you actually have to go into the settings to turn off the GPS because those are 4 antennas that are competing for space in this little box. This is one of the hardest design qualities of these little boxes is to put those 4 massive antennas in here and not have them interfere with each other. And then what do? We turn it on, put it in our pocket, even when there's not Bluetooth devices that we need, even when there's not Wi-Fi that we're picking up, even when we don't need to use our GPS. But those 4 antennas are unconsciously left on for most people. So I'm very conscious to make sure that if I have my cell phone on, it's far away from me. It's, you know what I mean? I keep it in a place in the house where I'm at a great distance and there's walls and stuff between me and that. Okay, so again, I think it's just a matter of dealing with your computer does the same thing. Your computer might have Bluetooth, might have other, the Wi-Fi, all these different things on it as well. And those are just as powerful as a Wi-Fi router.
Okay.
So when we look at like what are the worst culprits of EMR in the house? And again, you had mentioned having Orem Miller. If you're out in California, you just got to get on that guy's schedule or somebody like him and have them come out. They have much better scanners than this. They have, ones that also pick up electric and magnetic fields, right? Because there's not just one field. Some people call it like 4. They consider dirty electricity another field. Mm-hmm. I think of it like EMF, okay? And then I make it an acronym. It really means electromodal force. So let's just forget about it. Oh, wow. That's really what EMF stands for. But I use it because I think it's a great mnemonic not mnemonic, but a great memorization tool. So we look at EMF, electrical fields, magnetic fields, frequency fields. And again, a lot of people put in a 4th category called dirty electricity. That's like the Stetzer meters and the Greenfield meters you're talking about.
Right.
But I kind of put that in, I consider that in the EMF categories. Mm-hmm. So most people that know anything know that, okay, well, maybe they know their Wi-Fi and maybe they know their phone is dangerous. Well, that's one aspect. That's just the frequency field. That's all. You're still not dealing with, do you have electrical issues in your house? If you have a magnetic field issue in your house, that's worse than any of those. So that's what I had in California. It's infamously badly wired at the level of the state. This is what Orem said in one of my videos that I interviewed him on, was he talked about how at the level of the city and the level of the state, they have miswired these massive electrical returns that are under the ground. There's nothing you could do about these. And so here's a way of saying it. If you have a lamp and it's got that like 2, just that simple cord with the 2 lines together, if you put a magnetic measurement around that 2 lines and you have the power going to that lamp, you will not see a magnetic field or not much of one. But if you take those 2 wires and you start pulling them apart, this magnetic field will grow as you do that. So that's a similar analogy, or a similar, not even analogy, but that's literally what's happening at the level of the state, is a slightly different ground distance or return distance to power supply at the level of the state can create, in my case where I was living, the entire plumbing supply is now wafting with this magnetic field that was just bombarding like half of the way through the entire building complex that I lived in. So if you were anywhere, one of the 50 or 60 or 70 people living along that one little street, you were getting just annihilated with this immune deficient magnetic thing that's just going to crush your immune system. Like it just turns it right off, completely off.
It's massive.
And that's coming, like, in addition to coming from things like your plumbing, if some of that stuff is done. In Colorado, that's not as big of an issue here, if it's any kind of issue at the level of the city. But you can also have if you have any of those, if you have a ceiling fan, huge magnetic fields come off of those. If you're sleeping underneath a ceiling fan, your immune system's just getting turned off. It's really getting ground down. As Orem says, the electric fields wear you down, the magnetic fields grind down your immune system. So you're eventually going to get cancer. Like if you live above a geopathic line or magnetic field, you're just eventually, this is the science, is you're going to have cancer. So it's one of those things, like, we just didn't know. We were born in a world where there's this incredible suppression of the difficult information because it doesn't help with sales, right? It doesn't help the sales forces.
Right.
But guess what? When you activated your phone and you filled out that form on iTunes, or you clicked yes to that long scrolling list of legal stuff, it actually said in there, this is not a safe device. They know that these are not safe, and they have covered their collective butts. And you said, I am not going to put this on my body. I'm not going to hold it within, it's like a half inch or an inch of the body. It says it's not at all safe. Mm-hmm. Again, that's a huge understatement, but you signed an agreement and said, I agree.
Yeah.
And then started taking calls,
You could actually look at the paperwork and all the companies that have all their different phones, and they all say the same thing. It's got to be more than a couple inches away from your body. You never want to touch it directly to your skin. And, living in Southern California, you probably saw, how many women did you see wearing their cell phones right on top of their breasts when they were going jogging or something? It's crazy.
If Dr. Phil is saying that you're playing with fire by putting by storing that in your bra, then you are really late to the party.
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean? So I don't know how else to say it, but I'm with you. Yeah. So that's, to me, that's the big lesson that most people need to get, is that there's 4 antennas in here. They're all doing really bad stuff. You want to keep this away from, again, when I turn it on, I turn it on really loud and I put it far away from my body if I need to leave it on. At night, I don't even leave it on, but if you did, you could do the same thing. Put it in your bathroom, in your sink, you'll hear it through the whole house. But when you put this in airplane mode, and Aurum, we actually had Aurum measure mine too. I wanted to see this for a minute. It really is relatively benign. There's a tiny magnetic field that comes off of the battery of these, but it really is not. It's like I take it to bed and listen to music and go to sleep with it and stuff. So, but again, you just got to be cognizant. There are 4 antennas and they're not always obvious to turn off. Okay, so that's like basic level. Let's just start there. So some people need that. And again, the people that are ready to kind of look, that's what the Acousticom is. You can kind of look in your house and just get a sense if you're getting up in those big areas. And let's just do this for the sake of the call. Let's just actually show. Okay, so you can turn this. I can actually have the noise on or off, but let's put it on for a second so you can hear it. Okay, let's put it over here.
Okay.
Okay, so we see the level. The phone is off. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to turn the phone on and watch what happens as soon as I do that. So when you turn your phone on and off, it does this big get from the power, from the cell company. It sends a bunch of information, receives a bunch of information, and then it kind of settles down for a minute. And then if you make a call, though, it jumps up to that level the whole time, okay? So anyway, that's just a way of illustrating how good this is to read, and also so you can get a sense of some of the numbers. So if you have these really higher numbers, oh, by the way, see how it took a minute to go down? My phone's been off for 5-6 seconds before I put it down. So it's not deactivating the antennas exactly right away either. It takes a minute for it to do that in the
fascinating.
phone. So it's good to know, like if we start seeing, this is all the invisible behavior that we didn't know we had to be aware of, that we didn't even know is harmful. So it's just a whole learning curve for people, and just give it time. Don't worry, you know what I mean? Like let it be what it is. Don't be worried about it overly, whatever. We just need to sort of start dealing with the fact that this is what's happening. Our computers, all this technology, is not about becoming a Luddite. I'm a huge, the first company I started was a .com company. I love technology, but it ain't safe. It's not exactly safe. And when you're in your car, it's a metal box, and it's, when you're in an airplane and they have that Wi-Fi, you're getting exposed to these signals that have nowhere else to go except in your body.
There's no other explanation in my mind other than environmental impacts and environmental stimulus that would explain why, cancer, colon cancer was 1 in 36 of all cancers, and now it's 1 in 2, in 117 years. Like, our genes haven't changed, our structure hasn't changed, nothing's, you know what I mean? But
there you go. Well, that's the argument, is that we're genetic. Cancers are genetic, therefore, if they really were genetic, they wouldn't have jumped from 1 in 1,000, which is, I think it's like the number's crazy, like 100 years ago. And to now, the number is 1 in 2 people getting cancer. The crazy numbers I've heard, Zach Bush talked about, there's now the new reported dementia rate that he reported. This is Zach Bush of Restore, the product Restore. He's a great doctor. He's like all over the GMO documentary. And he's saying that they've now talked about a 100% dementia rate. And then, of course, there's the MIT professor that's saying that there's a 100% Alzheimer's rate. And again, these are just the brand names for all the stuff I've talked about, because we didn't know. We dewormed our pets, but we didn't know we had to do it to us. We have all the metals. We didn't know that just because we don't work on cars, we have all these metals. Just because, we've had a couple of bug bites, that we have this retroviral and all this microbial load. And that's what's causing all these symptoms. And then the symptoms get the name brand. And they say, oh, that's Huntington's. Oh, that's, Alzheimer's. Oh, that's autism. Oh, that's... Well, guess what? A lot of these now, some of the doctors are treating the same way, with the retroviral piece first, turning that off, and then having, seeing what's left, seeing what other pieces they have to unload for the person.
So how would you, Xiren, how would you look at the retrovirus if you're listening to this, and if someone's listening and they're relatively new to that term, do they find a doctor in their area that deals with it, or they read that book and start there, or where would someone start with that, do you think?
Well, I think everybody's in a little different place. Some people work with doctors that are highly adaptable, and you can just put that in and say, charge the doctor with doing some research. In my case, I like to do all the reading and research myself because I've had a functional brain during most of this time, which isn't very common. So I respect that. That's why I started my channel, is because I seem to get switched on mentally in different ways during my Lyme journey, which is the opposite of most people. Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of my obligation is to make sure that information is far and wide. Your doctors won't know about this. Like the chances that your doctor knows about retrovirus and read Judy Mikovitz's recent book is almost 0%. You know what I mean? So that's why I think the doctors are coming out with the awareness. There's lots of videos of Klinghardt kind of talking about this. Better Health Guy is another web series that I really, really respect. He's had a couple interviews with Klinghardt talking about strategies, and maybe I'll leave it at that as far as for people to dive into. But it's a tricky thing because, your doctor's not going to know about it. So are you going to have the brain to be able to research it and learn it or not? Or, obviously if you find a Klinghardt doctor or somebody if you're living on one of the coasts where you can get somebody that's been trained, like in the schools of Mark Schwartz and Klinghardt and all those guys, you're going to find somebody that actually knows exactly what to do. Right. But if you're on your own, then the strategies, I'll describe the strategies I'm using. How about that? And then people can, you've got somebody that can muscle test. You can take the things I'm saying, the products I'm talking about, you can muscle test them against yourself to see if they test, if they're the right product. If it's not the right broccoli sprouts, there's a million broccoli sprouts out there. Find another one, test that. And then the dosage that I take, again, this is a piece I think everybody misses. This is a great little segue. I know I'm kind of all over the map here, but I feel like there's so many pieces that I was missing along the way, and I'm the difficult case. I'm the case that none of the stuff that came prepackaged ever worked on. Right. If it was a Lyme cure that worked for, 10 years for, 98% of the people, I'm in that 2% that it failed for. Every time. Every single time. And I know why. I now know why. It's because nobody knew about the retrovirus, and I had it. Nobody knew about the really resilient, the northeastern ticks. They're very different. They're not the ticks, but the Borrelia themselves specifically are very, very they're much more aggressive. They have a much higher gene count. That's a whole other topic, but they're difficult. I represent the most difficult cases. Those, if you're one of those people and everything else that everybody's tried worked and nothing works for you, then this is what's been missing probably is the retroviral piece, the unloading of all these other aspects we've talked about, and more importantly than almost anything I've mentioned is having that muscle testing, or that somebody you trust with electrodermal software that can guide and test every single supplement, mineral, vitamin, pharmaceutical, food, everything you put in your body or work with. Some of them are talented enough, they can test even some of the devices you have and give you dosages on some of the different things like frequency-specific microcurrent or, whatever. Any of the different things, the biomats, the like you were talking about, and the beamers, all that kind of stuff. But that's the piece, is if you can find nothing else but a person that you can trust to give you those kind of answers, to give you to be able and get, maybe they have a talented muscle test, or maybe they have some of that software that I mentioned before, and then take the things that maybe either you want to try, or if they're a talented Lyme person, hopefully they'll be able to guide you a lot more than you'd have to guide them. But either way, that you're bringing products, testing them, and making sure they're right for you and they're the right dosage for you. So, what am I doing? So I'm doing... So Xiren,
Xiren, before we get into that, I want to ask a question from our chat room, because I think Chris says he has a good question, and just curious if you've heard of this. And he says, hey, Justin, can you ask Xiren if he did bee venom therapy and what he thinks of it?
bee venom therapy. I have not done bee venom therapy myself. I have it on a very short list of things. So, there's always the backup plan list.
Right.
And bee venom is very high up on if the things I'm doing aren't cutting it on that list.
I see.
Bee venom actually does qualify. I believe it qualifies as something that turns off the cell danger response.
Oh.
Something that turns off that retroviral induced cell danger response. Again, you can turn the response off, and then you're like everybody else. You still have all that work to do. You still have the metals and everything, but you might be feeling better. It doesn't mean you're done with your work.
Mm-hmm.
So even Klinghardt talks about bee venom therapy, but he has to take it. He takes it every 2 weeks or he feels terrible.
Wow.
But it's very powerful. It's very powerful. I think it acts on that cell danger level. And again, the things I've heard about it, are extraordinary. And there's a guy up in Boulder, Colorado here that recently opened. I just got word about this. That's like either opening or just opened a shop up there. So again, I think it's pretty phenomenal, the things I've heard about it, even though I've not yet used it myself.
Okay, cool. Xiren, we're going to take another little break here, and I just want to, perhaps after we get back from the break, we can go into some of your protocols and some of the different products that you're using in your own health and healing journey. I think this is just fascinating stuff, and there's a lot of people, like Xiren and I were talking about during the show, or before we started the show, is that there's a lot of people out there that have sort of Lyme treatments and Lyme cures, and there's some very basic stuff. And so I wanted to have Xiren on the show to describe some of his journey. And so I hope you guys are getting some good information out of this. Hope you guys are enjoying the show with Xiren Kenny. KnowHowThingsWork.com is his website, and I highly recommend subscribing to his YouTube channel. Check out some of what he's doing, and we'll ask him later on if he's going to be producing some more content for that. But getting back to sort of some of the protocols that we were talking about, Xiren, you were about ready to share some of the things that you're doing, either dietarily or with some of these tools that we're talking about. Let's get into that a little bit.
Well, I feel like I cheated people because I didn't even get into the house stuff that we did, all the EMR stuff.
Okay.
As well, but maybe I'll circle back around to that if we don't go too far off course with other stuff, and talk about what I'm using for myself and my family for the retroviral piece, things people can look at.
Okay.
Because there is a long list of things that can be used either by themselves that have, like the CBD oils, actually really full plant cannabis oils, not the CBD oils are great for a lot of the symptoms of Lyme, but you can look up, again, what I recommend if you have a brain, you want to do research, this is the book. If you have a doctor, buy them this book.
Okay,
if you have an open-minded doctor, that you buy them this book and let them learn about it too. But essentially, cannabis oils, if you look up Dr. Judy Mikovits, that's Mikovits, as in Stan, whatever, Steve, but Mikovits, Judy Mikovits, and she has YouTube videos talking about cannabis oils and things like that. Again, full plant, not CBD. These are different. Some people don't know the difference. So CBD can be mostly is from hemp. That's why it's available and allowable everywhere in the country. You can ship it, you can buy it. It's all that kind of stuff. But what you're looking for is a full plant cannabis extract. And so I found local people near myself and my family that actually produce oils, and then we tested some. So it's a sublingual tincture. It has to be taken sublingually, but she has YouTube videos describing this. This is mine, so it's a 1-to-1 oil, which means that it's got as much CBD as it has THC in it, which is what we want, but it also has the entire plant. It's from the entire cannabis plant. It's not an isolate. CBD is typically like an isolated aspect of the whole plant. Interesting. This is very potent for turning off cell danger response. Another piece is, and again, I'm showing you the product. Is it okay, right?
Yeah, for sure. Why not? This is we get to control this.
I don't sell any of these. These are just what tested. Again, if you end up interested in any of these things, you want to find the products that test well for you, and that's going to take having somebody that can help you with it, and then the rest is unless you're just adventurous, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would never recommend that. I would always say find somebody that can test. But this was the selenium that tested for me. It's a little bright here, so it's not. But it's anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the selenium brand that tested well for me. So I take 4 of these at lunch.
Okay.
That's another aspect of it.
And for those that are listening on the podcast, that was Pure Encapsulations brand, right?
Yes, Pure Encapsulations Selenium. Yep.
Okay. Good.
And this is all part of this is my retrovirus protocol. And again, I'm working with like at least 4 or 5 other people I care very closely about in my life. And we're doing we're testing these, and these products all tested pretty well for varying degrees of the people I'm working with, the people that are in my life. And then this is available on Amazon Prime. I tried all the different, I even, there's a brand that Klinghardt really likes that he helps kind of manufacture.
Okay.
None of those tested well for me, but the really inexpensive Jarrow brand of Bracco Max that you can buy on Prime
Oh, cool.
tests beautifully for me. So I take 3 of these at bed. And this is the one I was mentioning for all males. This is one of those, just a good idea. This will be something I take for the rest of my life just because I don't want prostate issues. So it's good for that as well. But this, again, broccoli has adapted very, very well. If you have a garden, you can grow broccoli sprouts yourself. Just do that.
I like it. Easy.
When they're 2 inches high, cut them. And that's a mouthful of broccoli sprouts every day.
Nice. Okay.
So those are the big pieces. And then I'd say this one is, again, some of the doctors I train with, they really think that 1 or 2 of these products alone can kind of do it.
I know, right?
And this would be one of the biggest ones. This is Cystis T.
Okay.
And this is the brand, again, that tests the best for me currently, and it's BioPure. Again, this one is available on Amazon as well as on BioPure US. Again, just to be very clear, I have no affiliation with any of these guys.
Okay, yeah.
But those are the products that tested well for me. The Cystis Tea, I just drink, this is what I've been drinking when you see this, me taking sips of something. And it has stevia in it as well. I didn't bring the stevia in here, but it's I get an organic stevia leaf that I like on Amazon Prime as well.
Okay.
And I put the stevia leaves in the tea. When they test the stevia against the best triple cocktail antibiotic for Borrelia, for the Lyme, the stevia wins, hands down.
Interesting.
So it's I put it in here as well. Again, it's recommended to do that, and it tests really well for me.
Great.
But
wow.
this again, the Cystis T is a big component of quieting that retroviral. There are other things. There are Bravo suppositories, which are a little bit pricey, but they have GC-MAF component, GC-MAF component in them. That's another. Anything with GC-MAF in it. There's a topic that might get your channel shut down talking about retroviruses and GC-MAF, but hey!
Well, you got to do what you got to do, right?
You got to do what you got to do.
That's interesting.
But,
wow. Okay.
Anything with GC-MAF, so people can make yogurt, or if you have a source of colostrum, like raw colostrum or stuff like that. Those are all, any of those things are good for turning off that effect. And then, again, what I did was we tested a number of these things together in the electrodermal on that software, and discovered the kind of exact dosage scheduling and all that for me and all the different people.
So Xiren, with that software, I've heard of the Zyto. Is that I know you mentioned that. There's a lot of different companies and people, and you also want to make sure that you get someone who's actually skilled in this. But is Zyto something you recommend?
Any of those, as long as the person is talented. Those, I think, there's a lot of scholarly debate as to which softwares, of those, the software that we mentioned are the better ones. But at the end of the day, if somebody's talented in getting results with whatever they have, that's what you go with. So like Greg Lee out in Maryland, he has a great track record. Dr. Greg Lee has a great track record with Lyme, and that's all he uses. He uses the Zyto and some of the automated programs on it, where just you hit a button and it tells you exactly where all the coveys of infection are located, and identifies as many of them as it can, which, it's very different than $1,000 DNA connections test, which you have to wait
right.
a month or more and $1,000, all that money to see. Maybe it's something, maybe. Again, the answer is, I can diagnose somebody by looking at their Facebook photo. It's like just, once you know what you're looking for with Lyme, it's just a matter of getting to work, like finding where you start. So again, the Zyto would hopefully narrow you down just like any of the other soft run. Okay, where do we start? What's the layer we need to start with?
So Xiren, a while back in one of your videos, you were talking about how important it is. There was someone in our chat room who was saying just recently that they have gotten bit. I'm trying to go back. I can't remember. There's a lot of really cool people here. But they were saying that they got bit. Let's see. Rebecca was saying, I'm glad I tuned in. She said, I was bit by a tick in May of this year and started feeling bad around 3 weeks later. It took a few weeks ago until I found out it was Lyme with Babesia. So in one of your videos, you were talking about how important it is to get that early window, right, where you're starting to focus on Lyme right away, right? Yeah,
this is... I do what I try and do with my research. I try and look at, I try and study every doctor you mentioned. Dr. Jack Cruz. I go deep into as many of these different directions as I can, and I get a lot of conflicting information about the best way to handle that initial tick bite. Or let's just say there's a lot of different ways to handle it, but the agreement is that you should. The agreement is definitely there that the faster you can get on it, the more you have a chance at staving off things down the road.
Okay.
And of course, most of the medical institutions, unfortunately, don't know any of that. So, I've had people go in with literally like a bullseye rash from that morning to the medical doctor in Orange County, and they're like, "Well, we don't have any Lyme in this state, so there's nothing to do for you."
Oh my goodness.
The traditional. Even guys like Dr. Klinghardt, who, again, if you're not, if you're in the Lyme world or if you're new to that name, there's very few doctors I think have a larger perspective that they can offer. And Klinghardt's got great information on the topic, but he's recently changed from the national standard of care seems to be what virtually everybody uses to address the initial tick bite, which is 30 days of doxycycline. If you miss if it's a couple weeks after the bite, then I'd say, I don't know, go to somebody with maybe start looking at that retroviral piece. It's never too early to start the Cystis T.
Okay.
I think, but doxy's usually if it's acute, if it just happened, then doxy's what people like to do. I was trying to find the book to bring it in here. I'm not a big fan of pharmaceuticals. If I can avoid them, I'd like to. And of course, if they're going to stave off 6 years of misery, then I'll use them. You know what I mean?
Right.
At the end of the day, I work with NASA guys that are looking under a microscope, and they're telling me what they're seeing when doxy and the spirochete come into contact is instant chronic Lyme is created.
Wow.
Check that out. So they're seeing the spirochete. It's called polymorphism, right? So this little guy that normally looks like syphilis, looks like a little screw, kind of looks like a spermie, you know what I mean? He's got kind of a screw, but in the screw shape. And the heat just changes shape. So that's the polymorphism. So in the presence of doxy, he experiences, or the colony experiences, that this has been a change into the system of the person. They've taken this pharmaceutical, and they literally turn into a bullet. In a fraction of a second. I even have a video of some of this on my channel. It was one of the earliest videos that I did. Whatever, it's like an hour-long episode, and that's one of the videos I show at the top. But these guys are now saying that's what they're seeing is 100, and they've documented over not just the 4 polymorphisms that we hear about, but like 120 is what they've cataloged, different shapes that this guy turns into. So I take that seriously. So I don't like that about the doxy piece. The reason I mention that is because Dr. Jay Davidson has a very different approach using essential oils that's in his. I recommend this book to everybody. And again, I wish I had it in front of me. I couldn't quite find it. It's a $6 book. You can get it on Amazon even. You can get it probably on his website, whatever that is, drjdavidson.com, but also Amazon carries it. And it's $6 book, and it's all about Lyme disease. It just came out early this year. He's missing the retroviral piece. I don't think that word is mentioned once in the whole book.
Wow, really?
Because it came out right before that research really hit. So, but everything in there is spot on, and it's really, really, really brief. It's a good book for a succinct, kind of approach.
Yeah,
but he does talk about how
I'll bring that up on this show. Sorry.
Essential oils. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I want people to see this. So it's called How to Fix Lyme Disease. So he uses a lot of essential oils?
Well, if we're talking specifically about the comment that you just got as far as what do I do since I've just been bitten, he's not only does he have an incredibly beautiful overview of the entire treatment approach to Lyme, again, missing this new aspect of the retrovirus that Judy Mikovits covers, but he's got everything else covered in there very, very well, and including the acute aspect of the bug bites. And again, he addresses that piece with, he likes the essential oils and a couple other things for that piece.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I think about that. I wish, I don't, the next time I sort of see or get an obvious bug bite, I don't exactly know what I'm going to do.
I know, right?
I have doxycycline. You know what I mean? Like years ago when I kind of found out about this whole thing, I had my doctor get me some doxy just to always have.
Okay.
Because literally, if you're not on it in the first 2 days, then I don't know how effective. You have to be on it even more quickly than your doctor can get you a prescription, probably. Like if from going into your doctor to getting him to acknowledge anything, to getting the prescription, to picking it up, to taking it. To me, you have to have it on hand. I bring it with me when I travel, when I tour and things like that as well. But again, I look at Jay Davidson's thing. I bought some of those oils as well, but yeah, that's, if somebody finds out better ways to deal with it that they think are effective. I know that Klinghardt just recently, again, kind of, I think he's in a lot of ways the gold standard on many aspects of this. And he just recently changed his approach. I was just looking for it if I had it here. I might not have it right in front of me. But he just recently changed his approach from doxycycline to some other. I think it's some of the stuff he's using for retrovirus, like
more natural stuff, or is it pharmaceutical?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's let me see if I can't just quickly find that. Oh, here we go. Yeah, look at that.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so he recently just changed, and what is he like now? So he no longer. So first of all, he has. It's okay. So that's right. He's using. It's called the BioPure. So that's the company BioPure.
Okay.
The same company that makes the Cystis.
Okay. Yeah,
BioPure.
I've heard of that.
So BioPureUS.com. They have. If you're overseas, they have. They're actually not located here, but they have other stores. But he uses the for acute bites. He prefers garlic and BioPure Cocktail, and that's the BioPure Cocktail is his product that you probably know about. And again, that's on this site. I think they almost always have it on Amazon as well. And it's just called Cocktail. And it's got a whole bunch of things in it, like antimicrobials, like artemisinin and wormwood and all these different things that he really likes. And that's a sublingual tincture. So you'll just kind of, or not really sublingual, you'll swish it around your mouth and swallow it. So that's what he says. He no longer generally uses antibiotics for acute bites, but instead prefers garlic and BioPure Cocktail. So I've just given you three options. I've given you the traditional doxy, which again, people are seeing good results with. I can't argue that one. I have a hard time arguing that one. But again, we now have some of these other observations that are not really widely publicly known that I've kind of personally established. People looking under microscopes, seeing what happens when the doxy and the bug meet, and that's a different.
Yeah.
And then of course, but you got to ask yourself: is the doxy really handling anything other than the bacteria? Because the bacteria is, I think, only part of the problem. It's not dealing with the viruses. It's not dealing with the retrovirus. It's not dealing with, and it's only killing 80, maybe best 80% of the target bacteria, still leaving 20% behind. So there's that. You've got Jay Davidson's book, that beautiful book. I don't know if you found that on Amazon to show anybody, but that's right. You found that.
Yeah.
Great book in his his approach, and then now you also have this one with the garlic and the cocktail. So, but that'll be something I get into once I'm thoroughly, you know what I mean? I really want to nail that one down so I feel confident that I've got good solutions. But those are the best 3 I know of.
Okay, cool. And I wanted to ask you too, maybe we can take a couple comments or questions from the chat rooms. But before that, what do you do with regards to if you find the tick on you? I know there's a difference of opinion sometimes. How do you pull it out, and what would be the best way? I know in one of your videos you mentioned making sure to save it, and I wanted to ask about that as well. And then we'll take some questions from the chat room.
Yeah. This is... the saving it is so you can have it tested and kind of you can find out maybe what it was containing in its gut that it might have transferred to you. It's basically another way of kind of beating the whole diagnosis phase of what's going on with you down the road and all the co-infections that might be at play.
Right.
I don't know that I personally, now that I've found some good trusted people that have the software we talked about, the in my case, the Avatar that I really like. I was working with somebody who had Skio and the Rofus. It's a Russian software out of California. But they all do the same thing. And now that I kind of have that piece, I'm not so sure that I need to know all the little different details of what the bug actually had at the beginning. Might save some money there. But it's a good choice, I think, to save it, and then at least you have it, put it in a bag. And then the removal ways, the different processes of removal are all about keeping the creature intact. Because if it's, if you try and burn it off or do some of these other things, then instead of unscrewing it from because that's what you're talking about, like when it's actually biting you?
Yeah. When you see it on you and how to remove it intact, yeah.
There are a lot better videos than anything I've made out there on the internet that kind of show a different process. I have a keychain with that on there. So it's got like a Lyme tick removal keychain thing for a keychain. And it literally shows you that, you put it on and then you counterclockwise rotate it. So you put the head of the thing in there and you counterclockwise rotate it.
Where'd you get the keychain? Amazon, maybe? Amazon Prime?
Man, where did I get it?
It's got to be on Amazon, right?
A long time ago. I don't know if it was that. That's a good question. I Google searched that one. Maybe I'm sure they have it by now if that's not where I got it. But
yeah, I'm wondering too. I'm wondering too, with regards to if someone has been bit by a tick, what do you think in 2018 the chances are that they have Lyme? It's not 100%, right?
Without being bitten, if no one else on Earth, if no other insect alive was around to bite us from this day forward, 90% of the people have Lyme disease already.
Oh.
Everybody has it. This is one of those things where it's a number that people are like, oh my God, everybody, like there's a billion, they've been talking in the East Coast in some political circles. I've seen some of these live streams where people are going in front of their political people and saying, hey, there's 1 billion people infected with this. Like we're still having all these political issues with even acknowledging aspects of it or proper testing or of course proper treatment. And I had a doctor, as I think you and I know, that out in California that said, look, you can't treat here. I've killed, when I use the national standard of care, everybody dies that has Lyme. So you got to learn it. You got to figure it out. And I was very empowered by that because otherwise I'd be a casualty of his.
Right, yeah.
Some people are offended that he said that to me. I'm like, you'd rather I die?
Yeah.
But essentially it was, that's where that's at. Did I answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah. There's some questions coming in here in the chat room that are kind of interesting as well and kind of make me think. So maybe we'll just take a couple of these comments.
By the way, thanks for this because I haven't, to address your question earlier about will there be more content for my channel? Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, when I moved here, everything went haywire. Like the altitude affected the Lyme incredibly badly. And I'd had all this great hyperbaric oxygen support in California. So I was reasonably functional by the time I left. And when I came here, for 15 months, it's been this. And now there's some very close people in my life that I have to really spend some time with, kind of digging out of the same hole that I'd been in. So
right.
So my channel is there, like the things that are queued up, I even have a episode on the 21-day water fast, distilled water fast that I did a year ago, and how that doesn't cure Lyme. Still test positive after that, but you sure don't feel it. It turns off the entire body. Little cystis leaf in there.
Yeah.
But it turns off that whole reaction. I was, as far as anybody could tell, even the electrodermal scanning, I was pretty much at like 98%.
Wow.
But when I moved here, so I've had a lot to deal with. But the point is, very soon, hopefully, I'll start to clear some time to be able to get back and do the content. That is very much something that I have planned to do, but that's the channel's been sitting a little dormant. So by being on this interview, I'm talking about all the things I've learned in the last year that I haven't been able to make my own videos for. So your channel's actually more robust than mine right now.
Yeah, no worries.
Although there's lots of details and things obviously people can still get. And
yeah, no, that's going to be great. I'm looking forward to your channel coming back, man, because you have some really good stuff. I'm curious, someone mentioned in the chat room, and this is interesting, Christina says, and I'm wondering if, I mean, she doesn't really ask you, but it's an interesting subject. Have you tried chlorine dioxide, and how does that affect Lyme disease, if at all?
Are you talking about in MMS form?
Yeah, MMS, yeah.
Yeah, I actually did so I have a video called The Research Mindset and Methods I Used to Fight Lyme Disease. And it's, I think, like an hour-long episode. Oh, wow. It's probably one of my best viewed episodes. And it's one of the first things I cover is the whole backstory of that, the history of that. Cool. And then how I was using it at the time. And I was using it for metals. Like when I look at everything as we have all this work to do. And these are the columns. My hands are the columns, the heavy metals, the environmental toxins, parasites, microbial, blah, blah, blah. And then there's tools, right? And there are so many tools that work for most of these things. Now, when it comes to the microbes, I know one tool that I'd trust. I've tried them all. I've tried just about everything. But anyway, when it comes to these other things, so we have to get those things down.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to have to ask you what those tools are, especially for the microbes. Yeah, I want to know what. Yeah, no,
sorry, the punchline was that I found better tools for the metals than MMS. So I've kind of moved beyond MMS. But there's good MMS protocols for parasites out there too that you can actually take in enema form that are really effective. So, but anyway, so I use other tools now for those things.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
But I did that for a year, and it actually brought when I did a metals test, a doctor's data, clinical Western metals test, like a provoked urine test before, and the exact same test a year later. There was a shift in my metals. There was a noticeable shift, which I talked about in the latest video I had up there.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. All right, we're going to jump around just a little bit. This is the nature of YouTube comments, so we'll kind of just do that.
It's also the nature of how I talk, so it's perfect.
This is perfect. Cool.
Sorry, guys, if I'm jumping through topics that you're not, this will be perfect. I'd love to have the chat people focus us, too, if there are specific things they want to talk about, because obviously we can go anywhere.
Rebecca says, I think she's replying to what you mentioned before about ceiling fans, and she says she has one above her head. I love YouTube. I love researching. I love the Academy. She's referring to the Extreme Health Academy that we have. I don't watch TV on my laptop most evenings. This is informative but disturbing. So that's interesting, right?
Let's make sure before we get off, I really don't want to leave anybody in a overwhelmed state or a disturbed state. To me, I don't try and even talk about a problem unless I have a solution. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I'm talking about problems that people didn't know about, right?
Right.
But there are solutions for all of these things. So it's just an awareness issue, right? There's just so much money involved in us not understanding how the world really works and how things are actually harmful. But all you have to do is look at autism rates, which have jumped incredibly low. I mean, it's like Zach Bush's numbers were crazy low. I mean, they were crazy. It's like 1 in 48 jumped to 1 in 36 people being born with autism.
Right.
I think those numbers are low. Like the people I meet with, I mean, it's crazy how many kids have autism.
I know.
And what is autism? Autism, we know, has that Lyme piece. It has the metals piece. It has the microbial piece. It has the retroviral piece that Judy Mikovits uncovered. All of it's in there. So And when we look at cancer rates, like we were saying, it goes from 1 in 1,000 people with cancer 100 years ago to 1 in 2 people today that have cancer. And that's what got me started in this, was I lost my 6th or 7th friend to cancer, starting at 6 years old. My best friend had a brain tumor and died overnight.
Oh my God.
And it was by the 6th person where I was like, I got to look, there's got to be something about cancer that my doctor doesn't know. Maybe there is. And then you wake up. But the point is, I don't want to leave people in any kind of state of overwhelm. The world around us, it's, even their phones, right? It's just, somebody didn't tell us. They didn't tell us that this is not a benign device. This is not benign. It's just not. And once you know that, again, just, you got to adapt to your Wi-Fi is not benign, your computer's not benign. The fake lights you were talking about, the fake blue lights, not benign. But so what? I had 3 months of insomnia. I did 2 days of doing Jack Kruse style sun gazing, which is where you off access the thing for 15 minutes. You off access the sun every morning for 15 minutes. You get that rarefied morning light in there. And guess what? 3 months where nothing worked. I even tried a pharmaceutical. Nothing worked.
Wow.
Nothing worked. If you can think of it, I tried it. Nothing worked. During treatment, this is just part of the Herxheimer and part of the inflammation in the brain. 2 days of sun gazing. Slept 8 hours straight, and it's been that was 2 months ago. This is so there are answers for everything out there. There's just so much out there we didn't understand, and we don't know why these things work. Like I can say sun gazing, and people are like, "That's crazy," but then when you realize Jack Kruse is telling us the pineal doesn't make melatonin. The pineal does not make melatonin. That's the squirt gun. That's the sprinkler. The eye with early morning blue light, only that AM light in the eye. That's the chemistry that produces the melatonin you're going to need later at night when it goes dark. So anyway, once you start understanding some of the pieces of our world around us, you realize that the answers are very elegant. So I have to say that because I really don't want to be another guy saying, look, the whole world's dangerous and we're screwed. Like, right. We're already screwed, but here's the way out. You know what I mean? Like I want to be part of the way out. I want to be part of the solutions. So it was Christine, was that it? I don't want to leave you.
No, I'm sorry, Rebecca, yeah.
Rebecca. Yeah. I don't want to leave anybody in a bad place. And there's probably, I think one of the most beneficial conversations I've had, because I talk to a lot of people with Lyme too. I end up having, once you kind of know this topic, like you realize how many people need the information. So I have friends that just usher friends over to me all the time to have conversations just to give them perspective. I have one of my dearest friends right now is all of a sudden in the last month has just had a disastrous, what I would consider retrovirus intervention. It's flared up and she's, can't stay. Her anxiety level is like, she wakes up in the morning and her body has been running from the police all night. Do you know what I mean? Like, wow. It's just for lack of a better way of saying it. So she's panic attacks and all that. And she's a brilliant person with his family. So everybody needs these things, but the conversation that I think is one of the most valuable to have is the conversation about having these issues go on. And then we start to think, the world's dangerous. I heard Xiren say these things, and my cell phone, The cascade of negativity, the cascade of anxieties, and the cascade of those kind of that feeling of desperate, all that stuff, that's not our natural state. That's just not our natural state. That is a parasitic or a microbial infection, or even that could be, when Charles Manson died, they autopsied his brain and found that guy had the highest copper level in here, like on record, that had ever been recorded. And that's that disassociative state. That's that, do you know what I mean? So, right. Like, if you feel anything other than joy, then there's a little work to do. Like, your natural state is to actually be joyful. And this is a big piece of it, is talking to people that think that they think that the thoughts they're having are their own. Right. And when I went through the process, I found the only thing I like for removing the actual infection itself, which again is only one piece of the puzzle. Everybody focuses on that. Most people get it wrong. And all these other things you can do very successfully with other tools. But the microbial piece, when I did it, I found a cold laser process that I really like, a very highly meticulous lasering process that was guided by the muscle testing software, and actually then double checked by a human that was applying the cold laser, doing follow-up testing to make sure everything's right and the laser's in the right part of the body in the right amount of time. So like everything's getting refined and refined and refined as much as we can. And every layer that we did was literally like what you would think of as so it's like we lasered for like a month and a half just on like the active form of Lyme disease, the spirochete form of Lyme disease.
Uh-huh.
And when you're lasering on that layer, it's like it turns it on so it manifests symptomologically, like in every way possible. So it was really interesting because even though I've been sick for 5.5 years, when I was lasering each layer, so it was like Lyme, active Lyme, and then it was Babesia. I mean, I had all of it. I had Bartonella, I had, Rickettsia. Like, again, I'm the complex case. Just like, if you've not gotten well and you've been dealing with this forever and ever and ever, that's the complex case. So what we found is that when you laser for this particular layer, like the Babesia or the Bartonella,
okay,
I would actually, I was going to show you my calendar here. So I've kept a log. It's so bright it's not here. Let's see if I turn it this way.
There we go. Yeah, look at that.
So there we go. So it's like a calendar of every. This is since the very beginning, since I really started documenting this. It's October 2014, but really it was January where I got sick. I just didn't know anything for a while.
Wow.
But during the process of lasering, I would write down all of the things like Bartonella sucks.
Oh man.
so we would have, and then I would write down all of the thoughts associated with it. Yep, sorry, I'm not doing this quite right, but all the thoughts associated with it. And, I would have that, it would be like amplifying that particular infectious layer.
Mm-hmm.
Scientifically, it's probably the retroviruses creating the megaphone for all that stuff to be amplified, by which you wouldn't otherwise maybe even hear some of those infectious elements. Because like I said, if everybody has these Lyme components, everybody's got these toxicities and microbial loads.
Right.
But they're not all at home in bed like the rest of us were or are. The difference is that retroviral piece. But during the lasering, I would feel Bartonella. If it was 5 weeks of lasering for the complete from beginning to end on that Bartonella, I would experience that manifestation in every sense symptomologically, the conscious shift that it has. So I got to see what's the flavor of each layer. What's the flavor of Lyme? How is it different from the flavor of Epstein-Barr? How is that different from Bartonella?
Interesting.
And they're all very different. You could, like, if I didn't know any better, and if I hadn't done a lot of work at grounding, centering myself, meditating, doing all those things to find who's the me having this experience. Because am I the guy that's anxious this week? Because as soon as I was done lasering for Bartonella, I stopped having murderous thoughts. And by the way, I could tell. I was like, oh, these are murderers. I'm at a wedding for my friends. I'm scenarioizing how many people I'd have to kill to get out the nearest exit. I'm like, these are not my thoughts.
Wow.
These are not my thoughts. This should be the most jovial, blissful moment. My friends are in the band playing to the bride and groom who are singing along, and streamers are falling from the ceiling, and I'm sitting against the wall having this murderous scenario. And it's not in my nature at all, right? So, or the suicidal thoughts, or, that come along with the different layers. So I could see that very clearly, like psychotic behavior in my being sort of presented to my brain over the course of all these. This is all my way of saying people get very hung up on the thoughts they're having, and they think that they are theirs. I'm here to tell you they are not. And when you peel those layers off, it becomes very obvious who you are and who they are. And there's a difference. And most people don't know the difference. So I have a lot of people call and they start going down their Lyme story with me. And I'm like, it's very few cases where I'm not just sitting there going, I've interrupted people. I said, look, and I mean this in a positive way, a way that I hope affects them positively, that the thoughts you're having are not yours. Like all the depressions, all the stuff you're describing, all the people you hate, all the this and that, all the incompletions. This is the characters that are making you a more suitable host for themselves, and they are in their own chemistry. And this is one of the things that's come out. So the reason that they tend to love the jaws, the dental cavitations, any of that kind of whatever, and all of the CCSVI access, like in the upper jugular and in the brain, is because the bugs actually themselves get addicted to our neurochemistry. So they are not only eating our serotonin receptors, they are not only turning off our dopamine and melatonin production and screwing with our, all that kind of stuff, but they're enjoying it. They're like literally high on our chemistry, our neurochemistry that we're not getting anymore. They're stealing it, and that's why they love living up there in the brain. They get that access to it.
Isn't that fascinating?
So it's just really good to know that for a lot of people, there have been personality shifts. And again, I wish I could talk more about some of the specific people I'm working with, but I mean, it's just, obviously we want to be private about some of that stuff, but like just seeing people that have been jogging for forever and ever since the 60s, like 5 miles a day since the 60s. And then all of a sudden they're afraid to leave their house. They have like agoraphobia is what a doctor would call it.
Right.
Well, in the 1990s, there was a meeting, and I wish I had the reference for this. It could be something that you might be able to Google, but there was a meeting in Europe of a bunch of people in the psychiatric profession, and the conversation on the table, I think it was even the title of the conference, was something to the effect of, is an infectious agent actually underneath all of like the DRM, like all the things that we diagnose in this world? Are we really just chasing an infectious element that's messing with the chemistry?
Right.
And the resounding answer those guys came to was yes.
Wow.
So, yeah. It's one of those.
That's just unbelievably fascinating. Yeah. Let me bring up a question from Jadox. It's actually not a question, more of a statement. Look into how nagalase enzyme shuts down GCMAF and breaks the protein chain at the 420th link in the chain. CBD can repair the damaged protein DNA and reprogram the system as our ECS needs the cannabinoid. Interesting. The nagalase. Yeah,
and by the way, when I was talking about CBD being an isolate earlier, I don't at all mean to diminish it. Like, without question, if you've got access to that, that's probably something you should do for the rest of your life as well. In respect to the retroviral piece, we do need the full plant. We need that full cannabis plant in there in some variety in order to get the activity that we need. But yeah, no, that jives with what I understand about it too.
Yeah, interesting. Let me bring up a couple more here that look interesting. Want to bring in some of these questions. I've been, the same person says, I've been bitten by hundreds of ticks, didn't even think it would affect me. Super health warrior, but it almost cost me my life by a misdiagnosis. Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's the same unfortunately, it's horrible to hear, and it's the same for almost all of us, right? Mm-hmm. It was a year and a half before I finally forced my doctor to sign the IGeneX test.
Wow.
And it was one of those where it came back positive, and he couldn't even read the test. He didn't even understand how to read the test, so I had to learn how to read the test and the bands and all that stuff.
Wow. And
then I asked him, I said, why didn't you, want to tell me I had Lyme? Why didn't you even consider it? Because when we look at these symptoms, they're spot on. Do you know what I mean? Like the symptoms I have.
Yeah.
And he said, because I don't know how to deal with it.
Wow. And that's the state of,
it goes back.
Yeah, it's the state of doctors everywhere, that don't necessarily. Berna B. Lee says, are you familiar? I'm sure you are. Are you familiar with Tony Pantelleresco? He's been on our show a couple times. He talks a lot about Lyme on his channel. Have you seen his stuff?
I don't think I have, actually, unless I don't know the name.
Yeah, he's up in Canada, and he does all these health videos out of his garage, and his YouTube channel is called Health.
Don't we all?
Right? Health and Beadworks or something is the name of his YouTube channel. And he's really into the nano and geoengineering and stuff like that. He's a really fascinating guy. But he does talk a lot about Lyme, so that could be someone for you to look at too.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get that from you afterwards.
And
I don't take notes now, but yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I can send his stuff over to you. Hugo wants to know, how much time did you spend in hyperbaric chambers and what was the pressure?
Hey, Hugo.
It's a lot of time.
That's Hugo. I'm pretty sure that's Hugo, the medical director of Advanced Hyperbarics in Stanton.
Oh, no way. That's awesome. Oh,
because
cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, how much time, Hugo, did I spend in hyperbarics? Lots. I think I mean, Hugo would know better than I from looking at my charts how many I took. But I think the last count was over 300.
Oh, wow.
And these were deeper dives than most of the. We weren't getting great results for me going to the sort of arbitrated national standard of hyperbaric care depth is 2.4 atmospheres. So sea level would be approximately 1 atmosphere, and then as you go down, you get these higher numbers. So as you go down, 1.4, 1.7, 2.0, 2.4. We were going to 3.0 and greater, which ends up, I forget what I used to remember this one, but it's around 100 feet, I think, essentially is what it, below sea level is what it translates to. And the deeper you go, the more that the oxygen in our blood supply, right? So we have like half of our blood is the big clunky white blood cells, and they carry oxygen all the time. So there's not really much to do with them. But they can't get to most of the areas, right? So when there's a little capillary damage and things like that, they can't get around. But the other part of our blood is the liquid, is the serum, as it's called. And when you're in hyperbarics, that is what gets flooded, right? Because then oxygen becomes that liquid, goes from a gas to a liquid when you're under pressure. It enters the serum, which has no oxygen in it normally. And all of a sudden, that is flooded with 100% oxygen, which can get everywhere. So the deeper you go in the chamber, the smaller the molecule can be, the more it can penetrate and get into to trickier spaces and cause healing. Really, it's like it just causes crazy amounts of healing. But yeah, I did, like I said, a couple hundred, 200-300 dives at 3.0. And that's about an hour and a half each for the most part, at least 70 minutes on the low end.
Yeah, and you were telling me before the show you did about sometimes 4 to 5 times a week, which is crazy, right?
That's where I did a lot of my learning. You can't bring technology in there either. It's not like you can bring your iPhone in, to these pressure things. So that's where I did a lot of my learning and reading. And I mean, that's another reason why I was there all the time, was because I wasn't just getting healthy, but I was learning and learning. Yeah. So
Xiren, do you work with people? If people want to work with you, can you give them some ideas and some, tips and things if they're dealing with them?
Certainly not right now. Right now I'm definitely overwhelmed, which is why I'm not even attending to my channel.
Okay.
I think on the other side of the specific things that I'm doing right now that are consuming my time, I really would like to work one-on-one more with people, at least because, like we're talking about, there's so much to it, right? That not even any doctor could, like if you're getting treatment, to me, it's all about knowing resources and getting an overview and getting people out of that fear state, getting their limbic system to relax, working with them to clean the house up. And once you give a little bit of information, I find that most people can really, they climb out of that anxiety, and they, put themselves in a state to get better. And I'd like to do that. Right now, the best I can do is with the channel. That's kind of my big main thing, is to keep putting information and ideas out there, and then have that, get to a bigger audience until I'm able to, people find ways to email me. It's not difficult to find that stuff eventually. But I let that be a little barrier of whatever. And then some people, they do a minute of research and they find that link. And then I'll respond to emails, and I talk to a lot of people that way. So I have a lot of dialogues going that way. But mostly it's through the videos right now.
It's fascinating what you were saying before the show, and this is something that we didn't even touch on with regards to this, is the aspect of your family history with Lyme and how families play a role in all this stuff. And, we've done a lot of work with family constellation therapy and recall healing, which I find to be utterly fascinating with regards to all of this stuff and how our disease process sort of finds us and wants an expression in our life. And that's something that we didn't even talk about. So, maybe we're going to have to do this again,
Anytime.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Because you and I had such an easy time coordinating this call.
I know. It's been 2 years, right?
Something like that. It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, Xiren, man, you're awesome. Thank you so much for the content that you're doing. And I think one of the things that I'm really excited about what you're doing is you're bringing to the table that 2% of what you were saying before, because I see a lot of Lyme protocols out there and they're so basic and so simple. And there's a lot of people out there with Lyme that have what you would, like what you were describing, that 2%, where it's like nothing is getting on top of this. And so, man, I just love the work that you're doing and helping so many people. And your videos are just amazing. So,
thank you. That's very nice of you. And I love that we're in the same business together. You're doing the same thing. That's great.
Awesome.
And we have to. I mean, the people that are watching this they're smart enough for finding it and saying just because it's alternative doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean, you know what I mean? In fact, these are the channels usually that you find that get to go deeper than the mainstream ones, which are just nobody knows it, but they got all you got to do is look no further than Max Gerson, right? In the 1940s, his beautiful, at the time, I think it doesn't work quite as well today because we have a lot different world, but at the time, he had that beautiful scenario for cancer. He was brought to testify under oath in front of a Senate subcommittee about it, and had 5 people testify as to their personal experience with curing all different forms of cancer using his really hilariously easy therapy.
Right.
And that's an oversimplification, but essentially, a somewhat easier therapy than anything you'd have to go somewhere for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not only was he murdered for talking about it, but the NBC radio announcer, Raymond Graham Swing, who was like the Ed Murrow of the time. He was the voice of World War II on radio.
Really?
In America.
Interesting.
And that was the last time he worked in radio, was that night, because he talked about what was said under oath in front of a Senate subcommittee. The pharmaceutical company called the president of NBC and said,
no dice.
This guy off the radio. Take him off the air, or we pull all our ad funding. And it's that simple. It's really that simple. So we've mentioned about, there's a lot of nuggets in here. People could get lost down for sure. No, this is, great stuff. And, the whole point of our show is to let people know that there's people like you out there that are going really, really deep on this stuff. And so in case people haven't had success with traditional, really surface level Lyme treatments, there's options out there. And I just love the hope that you gave everybody and all that. And we'll definitely have to do it again. Thank you, Xiren. You're awesome. I really appreciate your work, man. Keep up the good work. Thanks for being persistent to get me on here, too.
Yeah, no worries. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.